Today's episode of the podcast is a little Valentine's Day gift for you. We're going to be talking about love today on the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast. And I wanted to do something really special for you today because on the website and through Instagram, I've been getting a lot of questions from you guys about how to improve your relationships, but also I'm hearing a lot, understandably so, about how you've been trying to do things to improve your relationship, but feeling really frustrated because it feels like your partner won't participate with you, or that you try things and it doesn't work. And it's normal, I think, to start to feel discouraged and to wonder if your relationship can be improved when you've been working really hard to make changes and it feels like you're just throwing bottles in the ocean. And in reflecting more about this and what would be really helpful to you, what I wanted to talk about today was something called emotional safety. Emotional safety is a really, really important concept when it comes to relationships. Here at Growing Self, we do consultation groups, where we get together and we discuss tough cases. And I can't think of a meeting where one of us isn't talking about, a tough couple, confidentially, of course, but talking about a couple who's really struggling. And the conversation turns to emotional safety. And it becomes a conversation about how we as marriage counselors or couples therapists or coaches can really help a couple shift into that place of emotional safety, because then everything else comes together. And that's often the answer. And I was reflecting, I was like, how have I not done a podcast on this topic yet? Because it is so foundational. And it's really true. I mean, it sounds like a magic bullet in some ways, but if you want to transform your relationship and improve your communication and feel more connected with your partner and have it feel easier to come to agreement about teamwork stuff and who does what, and even your sex life. I mean, all of those things that seem like different things are actually all attached to how emotionally safe and connected people feel with each other. And this is such an important concept. It's actually the foundational goal in many ways of one of the types of couples therapy that has the most research behind it. It is an evidence-based form of marriage counseling and couples therapy called emotionally focused couples therapy. And because, at Growing Self, we only do evidence-based stuff with highly trained couples counselors, we do a lot of emotionally focused couples therapy around here. And it is hard work. I mean, I'm talking about it like it's easy, just increase your emotional safety and it'll all be better. You have to earn emotional safety in a relationship, and it's a process to create it. But once that is achieved, it becomes, again, just this foundation for everything else to work. And so, and it makes sense, I mean, when you think about achieving emotional safety, so let's just start there. What do I mean by that? Emotional safety is the experience, I think, of a profound acceptance. It sort of feels like unconditional love in a way, that your partner loves you, and you also know, even more importantly, I think, that they care about your feelings and that you can be yourself or go to them in times of stress or turmoil, and that you will find comfort there and reassurance. And especially though, that if you have an issue about something going on in the relationship, maybe something happened that made you feel angry or frustrated or hurt, that you can talk about it and have the confidence that not only will your feelings and your perspective be listened to and appreciated, but it will be constructive. It'll turn into a conversation of, okay, how do we work on this together in a way that really strengthens your relationship, as opposed to turning into this yucky feeling fight. It's through emotional safety that relationships are strengthened and grown. And again, I cannot stress the importance of having an emotionally safe relationship. When you have that, you can talk about anything. You can solve problems together. You can, release resentments and anger and enjoy each other again, which often leads to a more gratifying sex life and just kind of having a better time together, to be honest. And so today on the show, I wanted to dig in more deeply to this concept to help you understand how emotional safety is created in a relationship. Excuse me. How emotional safety is created in a relationship, but also what will damage emotional safety in a relationship, so that you can just kind of understand what to do, what not to do, and also really provide some understanding, I think, of how relationships work in a maybe a little bit different of a way that can help you feel more effective in your relationship when you try to make changes and talk to your partner and improve things. And so again, I wanted to do this now because I'm getting a lot of relationship questions, but also, as I'm recording this, we're heading towards Valentine's Day, and this is kind of a Valentine's Day present, because I know that you are going to get eyeballs and ears full of relationship advice around date nights and spending time together and saying please and thank you. And none of that is bad, but those things only work when you have emotional safety in your relationship. Think about it. If you are feeling angry or hurt or untrusting or disrespected, those little things, they don't matter. And it is very difficult to behave or respond in a loving way to your partner when you have basic needs for emotional safety and connection and security that aren't being met in the relationship. So this is why we have to talk about these things first. So I'm glad to do this with you today, and let's jump in. First of all, we've talked a little bit about what emotional safety is and why it's important, but sometimes I think it can be a real eye-opener for people to think about their relationship in terms of emotional safety, because that's just not even part of the language that we use, right? Emotional safety, it's even a weird term. But so to think about how strong and healthy your relationship is in this domain, one thing I'd like you to think about is how reactive it feels like you two are to each other. So reactivity, meaning, does somebody freak out a little bit? When somebody says something a little bit inflammatory or triggering, does it pretty quickly turn into a fight, or is there hostility? Or, if it's not an overt conflict, hostility can be expressed in many effective ways. So that icy cold, disapproving treatment, or rejection, or shutting down, or removing yourself from a conversation. These are all expressions of displeasure, and all of them contribute to a degradation of the emotional safety in a relationship. So think about that piece. Does it feel okay for you to bring up issues or talk about your feelings? Or do you feel like you're able to tolerate it when your partner isn't being their best self, so to speak? Do you get upset? Do you get your feathers ruffled? Do you judge them for communicating the way that they do? Or do you say, don't use that tone with me? Do you punish them And it's hard to think about ourselves in this way, but let's be honest here. Like, do you take yourself away when your partner displeases you? Do you stop showing love and affection when you're not feeling good with them? I mean, these are normal, natural things that we all do in relationships, but I think that's really the first step of creating change, is just observing what's happening on both sides. As we've talked about in previous podcasts, it is very easy and, let's be honest, fairly gratifying to think about how your relationship is going in terms of what your partner is doing or not doing. We think about that. We think about, how am I being spoken to? Are they following through? Are they helping me feel loved and respected and cherished? Are they, do I feel like this is an egalitarian partnership in terms of housework, right? Am I getting my needs met in this relationship? And that's, of course, right? I mean, that's what we know is how it's going for us. But I think it's much more interesting and uncomfortable, but effective in some ways, to kind of flip that around and say, I wonder how my partner feels about being in a relationship with me. Do they feel emotionally safe? Am I making them feel loved and respected and cared for and accepted for who they are? Is it okay for them to have a problem with something? Especially something that I might be doing or not doing, like, right? That's a different thing to think about. And so, to kind of crack under the hood here, it's certainly, possible to just do self-reflection, do some journaling. If you would like a tool, I do have a relationship assessment. It's my How Healthy Is Your Relationship online quiz. You can find it on the website at growingself.com, or you can send a text saying REL quiz, RELQUIZ, to the number 345345. Pretty sure that's it, 345345 REL quiz, and you'll get a link to take the assessment. And this assessment, it kind of asks you questions in a number of different domains. Like, it looks at communication, it looks at teamwork, all of this. But the very first thing it looks at, because it's so important, is what we're talking about. It's emotional safety. And this is a very quickie type quiz. You can do it in just a couple of minutes. If you ever wanted to do couples counseling at Growing Self, you can do a much more comprehensive version of this where it dives in really deeply. But this version, it'll send you back a little report just with your scores. And what can be really interesting is when you and your partner take this together and then compare scores. And what I have found to be really helpful for many couples, certainly with a comprehensive relationship assessment, but definitely even that little quick one, is that it is a neutral way of starting a conversation about how this is feeling for both of you. And that is the starting point to creating genuine emotional safety in a relationship, is cultivating an environment where it's possible to talk about feelings in an authentic way without becoming so reactive that you inadvertently shut it down. Reactivity, again, meaning that you get angry, you get triggered, you start to get judgy or criticize the way that your partner is doing something. That'll shut a conversation right down. Or that you begin to get elevated and you withdraw. You exit the conversation, you minimize their feelings. This isn't a good time. Do we have to talk about this now? That will also just shut down an emerging conversation that could be a really powerful opportunity for connection. So that is a tool and a strategy to use to begin to foster emotional safety. And again, harder to do than it is to talk about it, because we get triggered. When our partner starts talking about their truth, which may be different from our truth, we can have reactions to it that trigger emotions inside of us, particularly when we begin to feel anxious or angry or hurt or insecure about our relationship. Our little lizard brains flare into life, right? Our emotional minds, and we lose our empathy for our partners when we become elevated in that way. And we also lose our capacity for language in some ways too. I mean, when you're feeling like all triggered and emotional and elevated, it's difficult to even speak coherently. And so in order to cultivate emotional safety in our relationships, another thing that we really need to do is work on our own emotional intelligence skills. Now, we think about emotional intelligence, and on this podcast too, we've talked about emotional intelligence, like in the context of how it's being understood these days in professional environments, like, because there's been so much research that shows that career, not just success, but satisfaction is largely dependent on your emotional intelligence skills, and less so on the things that we think of as being the fast track to a good career, like our education or our skill set or our abilities, right? We think that's our value to the market, when, as a matter of fact, those things can often be trained on the job. What can't be are, well, what can be through emotional intelligence coaching that is sponsored by your employer. Total tangent, sorry. But what is much more valuable to employers these days and much more predictive of your success are those emotional intelligence skills. But career success aside, it's exactly the same skill set that you need to use in order to have a good relationship and to create a relationship that is founded on emotional safety. So, as we talk about emotional intelligence skills, what we often think of is our ability to understand other people, our ability to listen, to understand others accurately, to have empathy for other people, to understand how other people are feeling, like to kind of put names to the emotions that they're feeling, and help other people feel understood and heard and valued. And that is certainly one dimension of emotional intelligence. But another dimension, and I would argue a more important dimension, is the ability to regulate your own emotions. To be able to say, I'm starting to get triggered. Or, ooh, what he just said hurt my feelings, and I can feel myself starting to get elevated, and I'm not listening to what he's saying anymore. Those are emotional intelligence skills. First, that self-awareness, that's that first step, is being aware of what's happening inside of you emotionally, but also having a skill set that allows you to calm yourself back down, so that you can say, ooh, I'm starting to get mad, and I'm going to walk that back. I'm going to use my little toolkit right now to calm myself down so that I can come back to a place emotionally where I'm able to stay in the ring with this person that I love and listen to what they're saying and not interrupt and not, go all kinds of different places mentally, but really, like, my job right now is to listen with the intention of understanding. My goal here is to create a more emotionally safe relationship with my partner. And in order to do that, I need to be less reactive. I can't flip out. I can't shut this down. And how do I manage my own feelings right now so that I can do that? That, again, for me to just spool all that out of my mouth, it sounds very easy. It requires practice. And like, I've been a marriage counselor for a long time. I was a licensed marriage and family therapist before I ever became a psychologist or a life coach. And it's really it's what I do, right? And there are many different things going on in really good couples counseling or relationship coaching. Like, I don't want to oversimplify it, but I would say that probably, a significant percentage of what makes good couples counseling effective is my ability, or other, experienced couples counselors' ability to help a couple stay calm enough in the room in order to have a productive conversation, to notice when people are getting elevated emotionally and help them kind of come back down and come back into a listening place so that they can really hear each other and understand things differently, and not let it spiral into a fight or a conflict or a rejection that damages emotional safety. That in couples counseling, we kind of like create an emotionally safe environment that keeps a couple safe with each other, so that they can begin to repair that relationship, but also learn how to create emotional safety for each other outside of the room. But especially in couples where there's been a lot of conflict and hurt feelings and reactivity for a while, it requires a lot of energy to help a couple stay calm enough to even begin to have those kinds of repairing conversations. Of course, there's much more to it than that, but those are the first two steps I wanted to offer you today. Is, how do we have safe conversations, and what does that involve inside of yourself in order to have safe conversations in terms of emotional intelligence? But then the next piece of this, and this is where we really begin to look to the evidence-based model called emotionally focused couples therapy, of how attachment bonds are repaired, how we feel reconnected with each other. And just to back up a little bit, in order to, again, like highlight the importance of all of this, I would like for you to consider that the human experience is one that requires connection. It requires attachment. You've heard me talk about this a lot, if you've listened to this show before, about the importance of attachment and bonding when it comes to things like relationship loss, and how people like just really have extreme reactions to a lost or threatened relationship. And when we talk about like breakup recovery or divorce recovery, that kind of thing. Also, there's a lot of new research coming out. I had a guest that I've been thinking about her work so much, honestly, Jennifer Nicolaisen, talking about, new research into the fact that human beings are so in need of bonding, that in the absence of healthy human relationships, people will bond to substances or other addictive behaviors to kind of fill that void. So there are all kinds of bad things that can happen to people when that bonding and that attachment is disrupted. And the reason why is because it is so fundamental to our survival from an evolutionary perspective, from a biological perspective. But when we think about the term attachment, we so often think about it in terms of like early childhood development. And this is also something that is absolutely known. I mean, in order for infants and young children to grow and like have brains that develop in normal ways, they require safe, secure attachments with at least one other caregiver in order to develop not just emotionally and psychologically, but cognitively too. You see research that even like brain scans of what happens to children who do not have emotional safety and healthy attachments in childhood. Like you can look at a brain scan and it's very different in terms of the level of brain activity even than a child who was raised in a healthier environment. But what is also true is that need for emotional safety and secure attachment does not end when we're 3, right? I mean, throughout childhood we require it, but we also require it in adulthood too. And of course it looks different in adults than it does in children. I mean, adults create healthy, secure attachments through reciprocity. They take care of each other emotionally, and there's can certainly be like a sexual component in intimate relationships, a physical piece that helps cement that attachment, but also, just the day-to-day experience of having a partner and a companion and a friend to share life with, but one who is safe for you. And it's through these small daily interactions that our relationships are established and deepened. And this is again a profoundly important human need. It's not a desire, it's really a need, because we also see what happens to people who are lonely, who do not have even one person that they feel safe with. It does things to people. And so it's very important to not just establish healthy relationship bonds, but really nurture and care for and grow and protect and cherish the ones that we have. So with that kind of fundamental idea in mind, let's now look at what emotionally focused couples therapy informs us about how attachment can become disrupted and what we need to do to fix it. So one of the very first things that we do when using emotionally focused couples therapy or the techniques, if we're doing relationship coaching, is first of all, take a look at how a couple is reacting to each other. Because again, going back to what we were talking about, it's real easy for us to get focused on what our partner is doing, and it is very difficult to understand what we are doing that may be contributing to our partner's reaction to us. And so that first step of really good emotionally focused couples therapy is taking a look at the cycle. So, I might say in a couples counseling session, so Jane, I noticed that when John said this, you all of a sudden, your face started to get red. I saw you, it's like you tensed up, you wanted to interrupt him. And I could tell that this really triggered something inside of you. It might have made you feel angry, or maybe underneath that, maybe a little bit hurt, right? And Jane will say, yes, it's because he said it. I'll be like, okay, stop right there. And I'll, Jane, what would you typically do at home if you began to feel these feelings? And say, well, I would, tell him why he's wrong, and I would tell him that he can't talk to me that way, and like that's her piece of this cycle. And John, what happens to you when Jane begins to feel threatened in conversations and gets elevated? And John might say, well, that's when I feel like shutting this down. You know what? I don't want to talk anymore. Whatever I say is going to be the wrong thing. I don't want to do this. And that's really when I withdraw. And so that, and again, this can take many different forms. And this is a very simple overview, but this is the dance that couples engage in. And one that we don't often have a lot of awareness around, because Jane probably thinks, I can't say anything, and he just walks out the door. He won't even have a conversation with me. He's so disrespectful, without having any awareness for what she may be doing to contribute to that. And John might think, she's just always mad. She's always getting upset with me, and I can't ever say the right thing, so it doesn't matter anyway, and I don't even want to talk to her. And John doesn't understand that when he does that, that is why Jane feels hurt and angry and unloved. So helping couples get clarity around what are you doing together that is disrupting the emotional safety in your relationship, and helping couples find new ways of talking about that and taking ownership for their part in that cycle. Because it's a different conversation, for John to be able to say out loud in words, I'm starting to have that feeling right now, like I want to withdraw. I can feel it, but I don't want to do that, because I know that that's when you feel really hurt and abandoned, and I don't want to make you feel that way anymore. Could you imagine your partner saying that to you in that moment, when it could turn into a fight, but instead they say something so emotionally aware? I mean, that is a huge, like, vulnerable, authentic, true thing that will stop an argument right in its tracks. Like, you hear something like that and you're like, yes, you know what? And I can also feel myself starting to get elevated. This is the moment when I want to take offense to what you are saying. But I know that when I go there, that's when our conversations start to feel unsafe for you. And I don't want to do that. I want you to know how much I love you and that it's okay for you to have feelings around me. So I'm going to just say what I'm feeling right now, but I'm not going to do it. That is so vulnerable. That is so authentic. And that is the path to create emotional safety in a relationship, is being able to be vulnerable and talk about what's going on, but in a way that you're taking ownership for it. You're not saying, you are making me feel like I want to leave the room right now because of you. It's not that. You're saying, I'm about to do that thing that I usually do, and I don't want to do it this time. So I'm going to stay here. I'm going to work on my emotional regulation skills right now, and I'm going to look in your eyes, and I really want to hear more about what you have to say. And in that moment, not only is that cycle shifted, but that couple is having a new experience with each other. And it's that experiential piece that is really healing, because it becomes very easy for us to create narratives in our mind about who our partner is, how they communicate, what they do, how they feel. Right? We know because we've had these experiences with them in the past, right? That it's not like we're making this up. It's based on reality. But when people begin to understand their cycle and what they are doing that is disrupting emotional safety, take ownership of it, start talking about it out loud, and become very emotionally safe for their partner, it's an experience of healing in a lot of ways, because it goes against that old story about who someone is and what they do and how they communicate and how they feel, when the person who used to just change the channel or get up and leave the room or change the topic or blow you off or minimize your feelings is all of a sudden like, tell me more. Yeah, that type of experience changes everything. And that is what heals the bond. Now, again, sounds easier to do than it actually is. I mean, as a marriage counselor, if I am working with a couple who, is pretty far down that road, who have been interacting with each other in emotionally unsafe ways for a long time. And, as we've discussed on the show before, many couples do that. They wait to get help. They will go years and just like dig in deeper and deeper and deeper until it feels like their relationship is really on the brink. And sometimes it's too late. If you wait too long, there does come a time when attachment is broken and it can't be repaired. And I hate to say that because I always want to have hope. But the other piece of that is, if you can get some help and start making changes before that attachment is broken, with two people who are committed to doing the work, it can always be repaired. It can always be repaired if that will is there. So I don't want to make it sound scary. But so assuming that you are coming in and both of you still want the relationship to work, even if it's pretty far gone, as a marriage counselor, I would say that it often takes about 12 to 16 sessions of really like focused weekly work to begin to help a couple understand each other differently and begin to learn how to develop that understanding and those emotional regulation skills and that new awareness of the cycle, and then beginning to shift that and do things differently so that the emotional safety in a relationship can be repaired. That work can take a while if it's pretty far gone, but But if you're in a newer relationship and you're just beginning to notice like the first signs of this starting to happen, you can use the techniques that I'm describing in this podcast on your own, and see what happens. Because the truth is, because relationships are systems, when you begin doing things differently in a relationship, it has an impact. You can unilaterally change a relationship by being the change you desire in your relationship. But it means releasing this idea that you need your partner to act a certain way before you can act a certain way. So you have to just stop that and begin to be the one who is emotionally safe and who has empathy and who is listening with the intention of understanding. Because in a relatively healthy situation, like in the absence of major psychopathology or something, when you are putting that kind of energy into a relationship, your partner will respond. It might take a little while, especially if they have a well-established narrative in their head about who you are. I mean, if they believe that she's always going to get mad at me whenever I say anything, then, the first time you're like, oh, I didn't know that you felt that way. Tell me more about that. I'd really like to know. The first 2, 3, 5 times you do that, it might not make that much of a dent because they expect you to be angry with them, right? And it takes a while for those experiences to sink in. So that's also actually, I think, another benefit of good couples counseling is having someone note what's happening and helping the other person see she's doing something different right now. Can you respond to her in a different way instead of withdrawing? Because I see that's what you're about to do right now, isn't it? So to have sort of that coach who can help you guys both do things differently. So that is one benefit. But don't be discouraged if you have to do it a couple of times, right? So that is another little tip there. But above all else, emotional safety requires empathy. The ability to understand how your partner is feeling, but not just understand. It requires caring about how your partner is feeling and having their feelings be as important to you as your own feelings are. We forget that sometimes. I do. In my marriage, I've been married a long time, and if I am not careful, I can believe that however I'm feeling in the moment is more important than however my husband is feeling in the moment. I need to catch myself and use my emotional intelligence skills and come back down to be able to say, you're feeling disappointed right now because I said that. And when I look at this from your perspective, I can understand why you would feel that way. And that wasn't my intention. And let's talk through it. I want to hear more. So having that level of empathy requires an awareness of how they're feeling. It requires a caring of how the other person is feeling, but then also the ability to show your partner that you care about how they feel and that their feelings are important to you. And that's my last piece of advice, is that if you want to create emotional safety in your relationship, while talking about it and having those experiences are the path of creating emotional safety, you also have to follow through. That if your partner is telling you that something is really important to them and you're saying, yes, I understand and I care, and you're saying that, but your actions are not reflecting that understanding and that you care, if they're telling you how they feel and you keep doing the things that they're telling you are really upsetting to them without even trying to make changes, it doesn't matter what you say or what you promise, because you're very consistently breaking that trust and behaving in a way that makes everything else not matter if your words aren't, if your behaviors rather aren't matching your words. So those are other important things to be thinking about. Now, I know that this is a lot, and I know that we're kind of talking about big things, but I really wanted to offer you something substantial. And it's because I get your questions. I read them. I read all of them. And even if I can't always answer every single one, I hear them, and I hear the pain, and the discouragement, and in some ways hopelessness, about what is going on in my relationship. Why am I feeling this way? What do I need to do to fix this? And I think sometimes in your questions, I get this sort of hope that I'm going to say something like, okay, do this one thing and it's going to make everything better. And, if you've taken nothing else from our conversation today, I hope you do take away the idea that to create real and lasting change in a relationship, it requires a lot of intention. It requires courage. It requires commitment. It requires self-awareness, and it requires a lot of practice. So it is not an event. It's really a journey. And even though it can be challenging to do, if you're focusing on this part of your relationship and creating emotional safety first, all the other stuff falls into place. Communication becomes easy. Problem solving, like fighting about the who does what or the way the toilet paper should go on the roll or, whatever. That stuff, when you have emotional safety in a relationship, it's very easy to solve those kinds of problems. Parenting stuff often becomes much easier, because the other thing too is as two adults are working on emotional intelligence skills and learning how to be emotionally safe with each other, those same skills and awarenesses very naturally spill over into the way that we interact with our children, and a much more emotionally safe level that helps us have stronger relationships with our children and be more effective parents, because that is the cardinal rule of parenting, is to have that connection with a child so that they have that unshakable feeling of being connected securely to an adult who loves them and who cares about them and who is emotionally safe. From that foundation, it becomes very easy to teach children or coach children or help them understand the other skills that we as parents need to teach, right? But without that connection, that's when power struggles happen. But the neat thing is that in families where couples focus on creating healthy emotional relationships with each other first, it tends to echo out into the family, into parenting, into all kinds of relationships, and it makes a much more healthy, harmonious environment for everyone. So even though it's hard work, it's good work, it's worth doing. And I hope that our talking about this today provided you with a little bit of direction for things to try on your own, or to kind of help you understand what might be ahead of you if you did want to enlist the support of a marriage counselor. Now, on that note, if you do decide, if you try these things on your own and it's turning into a fight, and you just it's hard for you guys to stay calm enough to do some of these things, or if you feel like you're able to be vulnerable but your partner just cannot get away from those old patterns, those could be indications that it's time to do couples counseling or relationship coaching. Please, please, please look for someone who ideally has a master's degree or a doctorate in marriage and family therapy. There are all kinds of therapists out there who got a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling who didn't get any training around couples counseling or family systems or theories and techniques of evidence-based couples and family therapy. That is just not part of the training. And I say this so I have a PhD in counseling psychology in addition to a master's degree in couples and family therapy. That PhD, Like, you think, oh, Dr. So-and-so must be more well-informed or educated or better able to help. In that PhD program, I got one couples and family class compared to my master's degree in marriage and family therapy, where I got like 8 classes specifically in couples counseling, family therapy, child development. Did not get any of that in the PhD. It's all focused around mental health and abnormal psychology and psychological assessment and all kinds of stuff that you don't even touch. Yeah. So, as you're looking for help, be paying attention to what kind of degrees people have. The license that you're looking for is an MFT, Marriage and Family Therapy. That means that they've met educational requirements specific to marriage and family therapy. They have passed a very difficult national standardized exam specific to marriage and family therapy. They have clocked thousands of hours of experience with couples and families under the supervision of a marriage and family therapist. But then, in addition for looking for that MFT license and the degree in marriage and family therapy, look for someone who explicitly practices evidence-based forms of couples counseling, such as the one that we've been talking about today, which is emotionally focused couples therapy, EFCT, or the Gottman method. The Gottman method is also research-based, and it accomplishes many of the same things that we've been talking about here. It's just, it uses a different set of techniques to achieve the same goals of emotional safety. So that is also another something to look for. But if you're not seeing that in somebody's website or bio or profile, or if you start going to couples counseling and they're talking about date nights and saying please and thank you and working on communication without addressing these issues around emotional safety first, there's a good chance that even though that person is very earnest and probably does a great job with individual clients, they are not a couples counselor, and it would be to your advantage to do couples counseling with someone who had that training, because couples counseling is hard, especially with people that have sustained a lot of damage to their feelings of safety and security. It's hard with couples that are reactive, and a lot of what counselors who don't have that training do is very much like a Band-Aid approach that does not get down to the core levels that we're talking about today. And so you certainly do not have to do that work with Growing Self, but I wanted to share that information with you so that you can be an educated consumer and look for the type of help that will really, really be effective for you, and not at best a waste of time, or at worst, this last ditch Hail Mary thing to go to couples counseling, and then when it doesn't work, be like, oh, okay, so our relationship must not be redeemable. It might be redeemable, but you just have to get effective help. Okay, getting off my soapbox. So I hope that this discussion around emotional safety was helpful for you. I hope you take these ideas to heart and start practicing them in your own relationship. And I will be back in touch next week with more love, happiness, and success advice to support you. Thanks for being here.